We begin the Maimer of Parshas Tzav, the first Maimer. It's a very special Maimer. The Maimer was said at the famous Zloben Chasana, where the grandson of Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchev married the granddaughter of the Alter Rebbe. It was a very, very special Chasana, and known as the Zloben Chasana. And it's a very special Maimer. Out there Maimer, like they say. Says Aposek, ואכלתם אכול ושובע, האדם, he says, ואכלתם בשם השם אלוקיכם אשר עושים לכם להפליא, וליבש עמלי. Says the Medrash, with the Rabbi, the bench of Tzadikim, he does a double. ואכלתם אכול ושובע, and then it says, וליבש. So we have to understand, why is this a double bracha? This is talking about the times of Mashiach. Says the Alter Rebbe, what's bechlal inyan from eating? There's malochim and neshamis in all the different worlds of Bria Tzira Asiya. As the Pasuk says, v'lichvedi brasav yitzati, and there's malochim of Bria, and malochim yitzira malochim, the world of Asiya. What does it mean, food for the malochim? That's the sustenance and the strength for them to understand godliness and to serve the Rebishter. Like it says that the Malochim are Nizoin. Nizoin means they get strength and sustenance from the Ziva Shechina. Then he says further, Then he says further in the Maimer, through the Ribi Yishtalsus Marochim, this food goes over from one olam to another olam, and they're called Krovai. Krovai is the malachim that are like the stomach. Through them goes through the chef and the Michael. And what happens when a person eats? The body takes the nutrients and the rest go out. So the sustenance from the higher world, the leftovers, sort of to say, go down to the lower world, it goes lower and lower till our world was created. Famous Maimer Chazal, every blade of grass has a malach hitting it. What does it mean hitting it? That means the malach, it's his higher source. Like the Pasuk says in Keheles, Govaya Mel Govaya Shoymen, Ovoyim Aleim, and they get their sustenance from the Rebishter. To understand godliness, and it goes B'chol Krovi, it goes lower and lower. Until physical food was created, the physical steak, from the level of Pnei Shed in the Merkava, that's Malochim, on the level of Buddha. After many myriads of levels and Ishtalshus, level after level, you have the soul of the animal. And for the Pnei Nesh in the Merkava, for them is all the birds, from all the birds. And where the way it's Lamail on the higher worlds, Pnei Shed and Pnei Neshed, that's food for the angels. But through going down many levels, it comes down into our grain, v'chol mini to us. What's the purpose of all the sustenance going down? That when a person eats it, they add in him. Number one, a person can't live without food. Why does the person need the food? It's explained in this many times because it's the energy from Tayu. And even though they're at a very high level, but this is even higher. It says in the Pasuk in Parashat Vayishlach, Ve'ela Malochim Asher Mochel Lifnei Melach Melech. This very high level, they went down very low, and when a person eats them, he elevates them to their source, which is Pnimis Pnei Adam La'arbatom, and Dafka, a person could elevate them because a person is comprised from the highest levels and the lowest levels. He's mavriach min hakotzel hakotzel, like we know that a person was created different than all the animals. All the animals were created together. The soul and the body, they came out. But a human being was created first the flesh and then the soul, because he comprises in him the highest and the lowest, like the famous Gemara, that a person has three things like an animal and three things like an angel. He's like an angel, he thinks, he speaks, he understands. He's like an animal, he eats and he procreates, etc., etc. So he's comprised of both. That's why he has the ability to elevate the food. Says the Alter Rebbe, just like the angels are considered animals compared to the neshomes, because in their source, the animals, the malochim get from behemoths and chayes and merkava, and they all receive from pnei odom. So just like the neshome picks up even the malochim, here goes the bombshell that our neshomes, compared to the new neshomes that will be created when Mashiach will come, they are called, our neshomes are called behemoths. And therefore, they will have to elevate through the new neshomes. They will come down into the Levyosin Shirabor, our neshomes. And tzaddikim, the new tzaddikim, the new neshamas. There is the neshamas that are they're created in Adam Marish. Then there's new neshamas that are created for Mashiach with a new reality, with a new consciousness. And they elevate us through eating the Livyasin and Shirabor, like the neshamas today eat the steak and elevate the foods that comes from the Malochim. The new neshomes will eat us, and they will elevate us through the eating. You can get a little scared over here, thinking that we're going to be a Gilgal and the Levios and Shirabor, and the new tzaddik will eat us. It's interesting. It says that Tzemach Tzedek calms it down in the brackets. Doesn't mean that we will become part of the Yosef Shiram Born, the lead us for Kugel for Shabbos, but only in Nitzutz. Spark of our neshamas will go down in the Yosef Shiram Born, and through them eating it and elevating our spark, we will all be elevated. Just like it's explained elsewhere in Chassidus regarding to the Korbanos. All the malochim, and all the holy chayes hakedesh are elevated through a korban, through one animalistic soul that's brought in the mizbeach. So too through one of our nitzutzim in this livyosin asher abor, we will all be elevated. This is a new concept. That there's a concept of nu neshamas chadoshes, and it's brought down the Sefer Gilgulim. He brings down the Tzemach Tzedek and Mishnas Chasidim, and the Ramaz on the Zerim Parsha tell this. What's the reason that these nu neshamas will have to elevate us through our source, through a spark of our soul, going into the Levyosin and Shirabor? And the reason, it says the Alter Rebbe, because now the consciousness that we have is only from a Malik Olam. It's connected with only with the Kavannah that comes after the Tzimtzum. That's our neshamas. That's our consciousness. But Mashiach will come, there'll be the revelation of Seviv Kolam, which is known in Chassidus as the eagle, the circle that's higher than the cup. And those neshamas will be there. So this is pshat in the pasuk that we learned. Va'achaltem okhel, you will eat something that's eaten. And our neshamas that are Adam today that elevate the whole Seder Ishtalshus will be eaten to be elevated higher. Says the Alter Rebbe, this is what it says in the pasuk. V'hilaltem es asher osu mochim lahafli. Everything was elevated through our neshamas, and then our neshamas will be elevated through the new neshamas. Then will be Eishes Chayla Teres Baila. At the end, it will be the great light coming from Malchus, from our level of Knesset Yisrael, like it says in the pasuk. In Zechayev, that even though we were from Malchus, the new spring water will come from Malchus, and we'll go Chetzim Al Yam HaKadmeni, because through our birudim there'll be great wonders. This is what will be that the osa, the low level of safe mice of Malchus, will cause pella. This is what the pasuk ends. We will not be embarrassed. It says we know meheir or yishoma kil kalo. Now it says akil kil yake from the zocher. The kala doesn't say anything because Malchus is only mikabel, so the chos says ariat mukodeshes, and the kala doesn't say anything. But when Mashiach will come, the Malchus will be elevated to be Eishes Chayla Teres Bailo. They'll be killed. We will not be embarrassed, because even though we'll have to be elevated to reach the higher level in the Shomis, we won't be embarrassed, because the main Giluyim will come through us, through our Veda in Malchus. Now the Mishnah says in Psochim v'hakalo hifeches poner v'yichelas, that when eating the korban pesach, the Mishnah says you all have to eat it in one chabura. But a kala, like it says in the Yerushalmi, she's embarrassed from her friends. So now the kala's malchus is mekabel. She turns around there. She has a busha. But when Mashiach will come, it says, and she'll be a mashpia to everybody. And this is the bracha. The kefil ha-bracha, the double bracha, the Alter Rebbe starts with the medish, the yalkut. There'll be va'achaltem akhul, we will be eaten, we will be elevated. But because on the other hand, we will be eishes chayla teres baila, we will be the mashpia. And he says further, look at the Gemara, made cotton, the Shrabba, and in Torah it says that it says Asher Ose Mochem Lahafli. Hafli means clear. And the Gemara says in Erevin that Leiniten Nazirus Alaflot should be clear. So Pshat in the Torah is, even though the level will be from a very high level from Pele, that their darkness is like light, like we learn the great length in the Maimorim and the Megillah. But the Pasuk says, and even Tzedakta Matitale, nevertheless it'll be lahafli lahafris, that we will see the greatness of Masein Shal Tzaddik. This is our derech, what it says in the Medish and Bereshis. Okay, Merelikim years of the Medish, that's Masein Shal Tzaddik. But we don't know what the Rebishter wants. Then it says, Vayaris Elikim es Likkutei. We know he wants Masein Shal Tzaddik. Dafür verstehen the Medish, Appeldige Medish. How could you say, Any day, Bezim and Chofetz, Talmud Leima, Vayara Elikim es Likkutei? Now we know he wants Masein Shal Tzaddik. So that's Sofik. Those the Pshat any idea, because you're talking about Kamei Kula Kilochoshi, Kachashei Chokoiro. Also the Chidesh Hashosim Mochem Lahafli, that you will see that he loves your mitzvah Shemaisim Tevim, even though it's from such a high level, It'll be asher machim lehafli. Liyois mafli umafrish, that you'll see how he loves your maasein shel tzaddik. This is the pshat in Tonvel Yovel Yevesh, you will not be embarrassed, because it will not be like Nahama Dichsufa, bread of shame. We will feel good about what we did, because we'll see that even for this high level of Atzvus HaMaitzil, which Kachashecho Koira, darkness is like light. Nevertheless, he loves and appreciates what we do, so we'll be happy, we'll be the Yevesh. Till here's how long it's a go for the Tzemach Tzedek. Says the Rebbe in Sif Beis. This will also understand what the Medrash Rabbi says in Parshas Tzav. On the posuk Zeh korban arim b'yemi moshach say, as he says, Yeh Melohem Shimshon told them meho eichel yetzi ma'achol. That Shimshon said, how could it be a lion eats everything? How could it be food should come from it? How could it be eaten? It eats everything, the lion. Aaron eats all the korbanos. How could he be a korban? Zeh korban Aaron. Verstehen pshat in the Medrash. What's he wondering about Aaron? But we know there's vim heochil yeochil. There's two achilas. There's achilas Adam with a Cohen eat the steak. Then there's achilas muzechei b'nei mizbeach. This is the pshat. There's the achila that the Cohen eat the steak. It's connected with the Cohen, are connected with Shema. They're mevarer ban. So he says there's achilas mizbeach, that's adi oichel. It came down a fire in the shape of a lion that ate the korbanos. But then there's Adam, a higher level, where the Kenim are eating, and Aaron is mevarin tzushushim ban. He says there is achilas mizbeach. That's the inyan. Kunadi eichel. He says that who elevates these sparks? Aryeh da'achul kurbanim, because the soul in the behemoth is from shmorei efanim, and the birur is from pnei ayishav merkava, even higher than the malochim that we see from pnei aryeh. Says that something that's mevared is higher than something that was nizbared, that's being elevated, because you can't elevate something if you're not elevated. Like it says in the famous Sifri in Parshas Eiken. Today, Bishop told David HaMelech when he conquered Syria. Before he finished conquering Israel, how could you conquer? The Medrash says, "So muchlapalten shulcha leikivashta." You didn't finish conquering your palace. How could you go conquer Syria? That means since you weren't fully developed and fully nizbared, you can't elevate the world. You first have to be yourself elevated. This is what it's explained elsewhere in Likkutei Torah, that Amaoretz can't eat before davening because eating is being mevared in its tzutzis. This is what the Gemara says in Chagigim. The same pasuk starts about mizbeach and ends by shulchan. And the Gemara says because a shulchan of a person is like a mizbeach, he elevates the food. How could he elevate the food if he's still part of the world? So first he has to go daven. Even the minhag Chabad is to eat before, because we're weaker daters. We need to eat to focus by davening. But he doubted that is explaining the halacha. You're not allowed to eat. Because if you're still part of the world, you can't elevate the world. First, have to go daven, bring down godliness in your neshama through the 18 brachas, and then you could elevate the food. So since Pnei Aryeh elevates the food, he's already elevated. Because if you're not elevated, you're part of the world. You can't elevate the world, like the famous saying, "Samach lepalten shulcha leikivashta." Same way, Ba'an that eats the korbanos. he brings down Achilas Adam Elyon even higher than Pnei Ayish Merkova. So we must say that Aaron is very elevated. Like it says in the Pasuk, V'nachnu ma, that him and Moshe are for the level of Ma. So the question is, how could all of a sudden Aaron turn around and be a korban and be a mizbaren if he's elevated? Aaron that elevates, how could he be all of a sudden something that needs to be elevated? This the Maimer says, the Mendy says it's like the pasuk Vaachaltem Ocher. Now it's high neshames, and they're very high neshames, and they elevate everything, and they're perfect neshames. But compared to the new neshames that have been izgalos loving, not from the kav and chut, but from seviv kol almin. Even the neshama of Aaron is called behemoths, and they have to be all of a sudden elevated, and they become a korban. And that's the pshat. Meho eichel yotza meichel. That what was eichel? What was mevaden Aaron? That was mevaden. Now is yotza mimeno meichel. He comes into the food of the Yosin and Shed Abor and is elevated. He's elevated higher. This is the pshat. Shimshon gave a riddle because there was some honey growing in the belly of the dead lion that he killed. It was a beehive. The Gemara, it says in Seder that Shimshon is al Shmei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it says Shemesh, Shimshon comes from Shemesh. Omogein, higher than Shem Elikim. So there is Ari Dachel Kurbanin, he's a Oichel. He eats and he elevates. Nevertheless, we say Yotza Mimenu Meichel, compared to Shem Havai, that is Shemesh. He can be elevated higher. This is what it says, the pasuk in the Medrash. Ze korbanade, that even though his arin is the level of ma, it's totally elevated. Nevertheless, it could be ze korbanade, and arin could become a korban, could be isbared. And what is the pasuk say? Ze korbanade and biyemi moshach say Shem and Amish was very higher. It's higher from Chochmah Datzilus. So this Shemin is higher from the Chochmah. And that's why Aaron had to bring a korban for this to be mizbaden, because there's many levels and he was elevated higher. And this is Aaron. Aleph Han and Rabbi Shema Mishaskei, that she becomes a mizbad. Ze korban Aaron b'yemi moshach. Hey, that should have said Ze korban Aaron miyemi moshach. That from this day that he was anointed, he brings a korban every day. While was biyem, so he says, brings arichas at Tzemach Tzedek, that every day there should be this revelation. And he also brings a fascinating thing that says by the Kavannah of Nisim, Zeis Chanukas HaMizbeach, V'yemi Moshach Chesed. There's a famous question. Only Nachshon's korban, the first korban, was brought V'yemi Moshach Chesed. But he says, since they brought that, they brought down the very high level of V'yemi Moshach Chesed every day. And that's why he says that Aaron brings it. And he gets the oil and he gets anointed and he changes, becomes a mizbar because it's a higher level. This is what the Medrash says, Zeh korbanadin. It says, all the karbonis, it says, Zeh status Seilo, Zeh status Amincha, Zeh status Osha. Only by Aaron's korban, Zeh korban, he says Zeh, because Zeh is Nukva, where Aaron is Mevar of the world. Zeh is the level of Aaron, he's Shema. But nevertheless, even though it's Zeh korban Aaron, and is a very high level, we find enough to elevate the world. In order, you should bring that from the high level. B'yemi moshach say, which is a very high madriga. So even though he becomes a korban, he has to be elevated. Like it says, that it will be a very, very high level, and we will all be elevated to higher. Just like Adam had to be elevated to get this major revelation. That was on the day they built the Mishkan. Yasher Koyach.